All right. Here we go. We're here. We are back. We are live. We just do this thing like we always do. Good day. Brenda, I didn't say good morning. I said good day. I did it right. Look at that. I can do things. Look at that. All right. We're going to start with a special thank you to one of our top sponsors, FPEA. Their convention is coming up this year. And we are looking forward to it. Check out their website for the details. If you're a vendor and you're looking to register, you should get on that. And if you're looking for tickets, get on that soon as well. There's so much to jump into. I really hesitate to waste any amount of time with pleasantries, but we do want to make sure that we cover those. We love our top sponsors. If you haven't seen some of our other sponsors, you can go to our website at flhef.org and check out the recognition wall. On the recognition wall, you're going to see some of our other supporters, our vendor supporters. These are businesses that love home education. They're either a part of home education, like Saints of Florida or the Hub, or the Hive down in Hillsborough County. Love seeing you guys here too. There's so many. And Heed and Class Source and Northridge Academy. And you could be one too if you want. I have the details for that. Just email us at info@flhef.org. And I can get you the details on how to become a vendor sponsor and get yourself listed on our site as well. What am I forgetting? Oh, Brenda, we haven't talked about this in a bit. We do have our guests, so I don't really want to show it yet, but I feel like we need to talk about this at some point. Remind me before we're done, and we'll talk about Discovery Day, and I'll pull it up. But I don't want to jump and show it without also showing our visitors first, because we have some visitors with us. Brenda, how about introducing our visitors?
Well, I am so excited that we were able to get our visitors on today. I met Amber when she was 13 years old. That shows you how old we are. But she attended a support group that I spoke to in Lakeland to encourage homeschoolers to get involved in political campaigns. And Amber caught the vision, and she and her mom walked 13 precincts for John Stargell, who was running for the House of Representatives. And every precinct she walked, they won. Since then, Amber has become a homeschool mom and a mother of 4. Is that right, Amber? 4?
Yeah, that's right.
And has been very involved in issues for several years and is a member of other groups that work on other issues, but we're delighted to have her here. And Rebekah is a longtime friend. If I remember correctly, you said you got involved and interested in politics when you lived in Oklahoma and your father was in the legislature?
No, my father wasn't, but we lived in Oklahoma City. And so I was a page as a teenager and continued to work as a Capitol all the way up. So,
and she's been very involved in politics since she moved to Florida. Rebekah has 2 children and has run a home education learning center. Maybe you should describe what it is. I'm not sure I'll get it right.
But that's pretty much it. A learning center, 2 days a week, tutoring, a support for homeschoolers. For about
and you do actually serve UA kids, do you not?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. A lot of unique abilities. Yes.
So. Very cool.
So thank you. Y'all have a lot of experience between the 2 of you, and we've been working on issues that we found in House Bill 1403. I think we spent 3.5 hours together on Saturday.
Yeah.
So hopefully we're defining the issues that we have in that bill, which we hope to get resolved in the legislature.
Yeah. And so, Amber, we'll start with you. When we were talking about this, I know that there's a lot of people who weren't in that conversation with us, and maybe we don't need to have the entire conversation again because the stream doesn't need to go 3 hours. But You were relating how some of this bill concerns you, and there are things in it that are of interest to you. And truth be told, the Home Education Foundation, we have been getting a lot of flack lately about not caring about unique abilities parents or the needs. Even when Brenda spoke in the subcommittee, that we the Choice and Innovation subcommittee just this past week, and she mentioned that it was very important to us that some of the changes that they're making not spill over into the unique abilities language that's in the
Yes,
bill.
absolutely.
Speak to your concerns.
Well, I think that part of anytime these issues come up, it can be, I'm sorry, anytime that these issues come up, it can feel very threatening because these are issues that are close to our hearts and they have real world consequences. So if funding regulations are changed, there may be plans that parents have. There may be plans that parents that have students with unique abilities have. And so I think it's very normal to feel very threatened with this because I share that feeling. I currently do not have any children that are on PEP, but I saw the things that were happening with PEP and I was concerned, even though it didn't directly impact us for this upcoming year. And I think that with this bill, what a lot of people aren't understanding is there isn't a lot in there about unique abilities. It's actually very limited. The change that has come in for unique abilities is a positive. Prior to this, there was a cutoff. So if you have a 3-year-old that's an ESE student, they right now, as soon as a lot of families that are having developmental challenges or speech challenges have early steps come in. The minute that your child turns 3, they're no longer eligible for early steps because that program graduates out. So the only option was for kids to go into the public school and receive services there because the way that the statutes were previously worded, your child had to turn 3 by September 1st in order to apply for any benefits that year with the funding. And so this bill changes that. It's if your child is going to be 3 during the school year that you're applying for. And so it's a positive change that's coming in for UA. But I think because of the way the wording in the bill is, I even had to look through it several times and look at the staff analysis to really understand that this is not about unique abilities funding. And so I think that's why this is a positive for unique abilities. And I think because Brenda and the Homeschool Education Foundation have always been very proactive to try to look down the road, like this is this step, what's the next step coming? I think that's why she even mentioned it at all. So I could understand why if parents aren't super engaged with the legislative process or understanding where to find these bills or how to read through the wording, that it could feel very threatening to them. But I actually, as a unique abilities parent, I feel really good about this bill. And that 3-year-old issue is actually an issue that I had been working on several months ago. And I asked them to address in special session and they couldn't. They didn't have the ability to, but they took it and ran with it and they fixed it in this bill. And I am absolutely thrilled to see that. My son specifically was one that was not able to apply this year because his birthday was the end of September rather than before September 1st. And so to get to see how this is going to help so many others, that age of 3 developmentally is such a critical time for unique ability students.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you. Thank you for speaking to that. Rebekah, as I understand it, you have children with PEP, correct?
Yes.
And without.
Yes, and without.
Okay.
I have a little too. So yes.
So I think it's very interesting. There's a conversation that's happening online. You've probably seen it. The PEP students are not home education students. And I think it's really important that we kind of differentiate ideologically and legally when we have that conversation. Specifically, legally, home education is a different path. It's a separate path. Brenda worked, the scholarships were coming in to home education, and Brenda worked very hard to get a separate path created called Personalized Education Program so that home education, the laws that impact home education, remained intact for them, and that if people wanted to take the scholarship, they could, and if they didn't have the extra regulations or any of the extra red tape maybe that come along with it. And as as an outplay from that, the community has kind of taken that and done its own little dance with it in the terms of saying like, well, these aren't home education students at all. And I think you're in a unique situation because you have both in your house. And I think it's very clear that on an ideological front, you're home educating all of your kids, right? You're a parent directing their education. And on some, you have the PEP scholarship to assist, and some not. And I think that's a very interesting spot for you to be in. And I'm very glad you're on this call. We found a unicorn, so to
Well,
speak.
I think that the message needs to be, and Brenda understands last session on HB1, or when it was HB1, when that whole thing was going on, I've been and worked in private schools. I've been part of the homeschool community. There's a good marriage between the two of them, but the message needs to be now, hey, you decided to send your child to a private school, you go. That's what's worked for you. You've decided to use PEP for one of your students. Great. I'm happy for you. You've decided not to use PEP. Good for you. I mean, instead of us all kind of tearing each other down, I feel like there's been a huge tear down of people judging. If you take the money, you're this. If you don't take the money, then you're this. If you
sell out,
here's the thing. I was fundamentally kind of against taking the scholarship money at the beginning, but here's the deal. It's there. It's here to stay in Florida. So it's going to be a huge blessing to some families. Even if they have 6 children and 5 of them don't use the funds, but they have one that wants to do this expensive program or do something more with it, I think that funds available is going to make it better for families, or families who maybe financially could not homeschool but have always wanted to. So it makes it opens a pathway for more people. So I think we need to get together and say, okay, how can we help and support each other? And I know you and your organization, and Brenda particularly, is saying, okay, how can we protect everyone to make sure that this is protecting everyone's freedoms? It's choice. You're choosing what you want to do. So don't judge someone else or be unkind. I've seen a lot of unkindness about your choice. We have all chosen to do what we think is right for our family. As a community, we need to be supportive, whether it's your decision or not. Some people spank their children and some people don't. I can't sit here and be judgy whether you do that or not. Like, you do what works for you in your home. I mean, if you want a gentle parent,
no, beat your kids.
Do what you want to with your own children. Be supportive of another mom, and be supportive of the people who are trying to fix it. Like Brenda is here. We're doing the best we can. Not everyone can read a bill, but everyone can be supportive.
Which I think is so true. And it's funny too, because all of the people mentioned in that group are seeking to not take the easiest path, to think outside the box and not just say, okay, well, this is what everyone does. And so that should unite us. You have parents, like, each parent isn't just saying, well, let's just go with the status quo. Like, they're taking time to think through that. That's a positive. It's a very big positive.
Michelle, I see your question. We're going to get to it soon. I just want to do I want to have a couple of pieces of conversation before we get to that, but stay tuned. We will get to your question. So that's a good one. All right. Amber, Rebekah, we have a celebrity in our midst. Apparently, Crystal Crawford, after speaking at HB1403 subcommittee on innovation, became somewhat of an internet sensation, which is awesome. Congratulations.
To be any kind of sensation.
What was your take? What was your take on, or your takeaway from that subcommittee meeting? What were you watching for? Amber, we'll start with you.
In any of these meetings, it's always a good thing when there's open discussion and when you see the legislators not just immediately like closing down and being like, no, that won't work. Like, everyone was very open in that committee. I think if there are people that aren't necessarily super familiar with the process, again, I used the word threatening before. There's so much about these processes, because they're so complex and because they matter to our everyday lives, they can feel very threatening. And so anytime you have people coming in and giving input in that committee, that can't have an immediate reaction. Like they can't say, okay, hey, can you go ahead and write that into the bill? We'll add that in right now. Like there's discussions that have to happen.
Right.
They have to have discussions with committee staff. They have to run it through. Like they have to compare, you know, statutes in other areas. Their attorneys on that. Like you have to talk to the different people. It may be not the person that ran the bill that puts that amendment in. Like there is so much complexity to that process. So I've
Yes.
heard of people saying, oh, that did not go well. No, it
Right.
went really well. First of all, there weren't any people that were like yelling or screaming. That's always a positive in the committee. You know, we've seen that before with them testifying.
Wow.
And there was, you know, there were a lot of questions. And I felt like the way the legislators came across is that they actually really cared. Like they were talking already about what their constituents had been writing to them. They were asking specific questions. They were engaging.
Mhm.
And I find that very encouraging. It's just
Absolutely.
like any of our relationships, as long as the lines of communication are open, that's a
I want to have a
positive
follow-up question. Sorry.
thing. No, that's it. That's all I was going to
Okay.
say.
I want a follow-up question to that, but before I do that, I want to just say that when I watched because I cut the video of Crystal's testimony out and kind of made it more easily accessible so that people didn't have to watch the whole thing, and I put it
So
up
that
on
she could
YouTube.
become an internet sensation.
Yeah, that's my fault, maybe. I'm proud. She did great. No, but what's interesting is when I was watching it, I noticed if I'm a viewer and I was just watching the live streamed, they didn't get to see what I saw. Where I was sitting, which is like directly behind the podium, oddly enough, me and my homeless man hair, I was sitting directly behind it. I could see their faces, and I know that Chambliss, after he was listening to Crystal's testimony, he got up and walked out and came back with a pencil and paper, a pad of paper he didn't have before. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's really cool. And then I also noticed that Rizzo's face was, he has like an even symmetry to his face. He's a handsome guy. He's got a good look. But I noticed that as she was talking, his mouth turned down, and
He was
I could
deeply
really tell.
concentrating.
I could really tell he was deeply concentrating and connecting to what she was saying. And I noticed that when I'm cutting the video, no one gets to see any of those things happen. So it's easy, I think, to walk away from that with a negative experience, perhaps not seeing all the things that you wanted to see out of maybe that legislative process, but then also maybe not knowing what to expect. So here's my follow-up question after all that. Sorry. You mentioned before our call that you haven't necessarily fallen in love with politics. You actually don't like politics, but you love the legislative process. So
Very much.
maybe for a lot of people who aren't as familiar with the legislative process as you are, maybe walk them through a couple of things that are important to have patience on, or important to keep in mind as we're going through this. Like what can you offer for that?
Sure. So I feel like, especially in our political climate right now, which impacts our legislative process and our legislators, that there's very much a you versus them mentality. You see it across the board. You know, there's terms thrown out, who's a rhino, who's not, what defines that, what doesn't. You even have groups that put out, well, you know, this person gets an A, or this person gets a B, or this person gets a C. And there's so much damage that comes with that, because you could have a bill that's 95% good, but there could be one piece in it that a legislator has a conscience issue over, that they can't vote for it. It could be a very positive bill. And so then people judge and say, well, why did they vote no? Obviously, they're the, you know, and so there's all of that. There's so much complexity to the legislative process. And so I feel like so many people that are complaining and are upset have never one time taken the time to even watch a committee. You can watch every single committee meeting online through myfloridahouse.gov or through the Senate website. And so I feel so many people that are coming from a place of negativity, and we can come from a place not like, what do we not support? And yes, we're going to have to fight against things, but what do we support? Like for every negative you see, what positive idea do you have to change? Because a lot of people come in and they're very negative about it and say, well, this needs to be fixed. but how? Like, have you taken time to think through how it needs to be fixed? Because what a lot of people don't understand, so I'll just speak for the House of Representatives, each one of those legislators, this is a part-time job. It is not a high-paying part-time job. It is just a part-time job. They all have lives. You have people that are school teachers. You have people that are funeral directors. You have people that are doctors, attorneys, like all of these are dentists, all of these different things. And so, which is valuable because that means that each of them brings a very unique perspective to the process, which is the whole point of legislative process, is to run these ideas through various committees that focus on one particular angle of that and how it impacts that particular subject. And then you have all of these people coming, and you don't have to agree with them. I've seen legislators that I disagreed with almost everything, but 5% of the time they made such a valuable point that you're like, yeah, I get it. Like, that's a really good point. And so keeping that open understanding, and also realizing that it's called the legislative process because it's a process with many different stops along the way. It's almost like the telephone game that kids play, where you start giving the statement at one end, and by the time it's been whispered through 20 kids, it goes from there's a blue dog with a big tail to the tornado hit the yellow barn, and you're like, how did you get there? A lot of those changes happen, and so I think people feel, again, very threatened because they see this and they're like, they're trying to do this, but many of the legislators, and this is just one bill for them, they have all of these bills to deal with. So I just think if there can be some understanding and some grace, and just get it that, like, all of us are more appealed to when someone is kind and articulate and actually helps us fix the issue and says, here's the solution that I have, here's the actual wording that I have, rather than just being like, the terrible people that are trying to ruin our lives and you need to fix it.
That's a very good point. And Heather I'm going to butcher this, Heather, I apologize, but Heather Treviso says 100% me, zero experience, and completely panicked. And she's got like emoji faces. When I was filling out the appearance form, one second. When I was filling out the appearance form, we had to pick oppose or approve. There wasn't an in between. There wasn't a maybe. there wasn't a, well, if you adjust this, then maybe blah blah blah. So you basically, when you appear, you have to pick one. And I think realizing that what's on, especially like in that meeting, what's on the docket is, does it go through or get completely squashed? Right? Does it get pushed through and the wording get worked on or amended, or do we throw it all out? Right? Like, that's really what's on the table.
Is the bus driving to the next stop, or is it in the ditch on the side of the road?
Right. And the bills have multiple stops, right, that they have to go through. And I don't know that everyone who's watching knows that, right? So I think that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, if I could just add to what Amber said.
Yep. Speak up.
I saw a lot of parent concern after the last subcommittee that the fact that certain people waived in support of the bill, they took that to mean that they were waiving in support of the restriction on instructional materials. So I just want to point out that HB1403 addresses lots of things.
Yes.
And I know that that was the big thing that parents were really worried about in the PEP communities online. But it addressed a lot of things like the timing of funding for private schools and a lot of other issues that were important things that needed to be addressed. So someone waiving in support, like Amber said, it's complex, and someone waiving in support of the bill does not necessarily mean that they agree with the exact wording right now for instructional materials. They may see something else in the bill. Yeah.
Well, there's over 80 pages to the bill, and that instructional materials issue takes up 6 of those lines.
Right. So that was something I was trying to explain
lines
to parents, because I don't know if I should mention this by name or not, but there was someone from Step Up at the subcommittee, and apparently there was another parent. They posted anonymously in the PEP Facebook group, so I don't know who they were, but there was a parent physically in attendance at the subcommittee who afterwards was made a post that was it was a very helpful post, because it had, like, who to contact, but thrown in there was a line that, oh, and by the way, you should all know that Step Up waived in favor of this change. And so I was trying to explain to people that not necessarily. They may have been waving in support of any of the other topics that are covered in HB 1403.
And can I interject? Amber and I had
Please.
worked for a long time to get the 3-year-old issue fixed, which is fixed in this bill. Amber's been working on that for over a year. So we want to say, yes, yay, you fixed it, that now there's not a glitch from 3 to 4 for thousands of children in Florida to get those special needs they need. All right.
Yes.
So we would wave in support of that because yay, they put that in. But
Right.
one little, and then here's what I'd also like to say on this process. When it goes to committee, when you are in committee, they're not going to fix that issue right there that day. You're letting them know there's an issue so they can fix it for the next committee. We're there to say, hey, thank you for this bill. And, you know, this isn't the only bill. There are 3 education bills that are all close to 100 pages, which will all probably be 100 pages by the time we're done. So you're talking about someone, we're reading extensive amounts of it. And you can't always, not every mom has the time. It took me 2 hours to sit down and read through just this bill. Like, let's be honest. It took me
And then
2
we
hours.
talked on the phone for 3.
And then we talked on the phone for 3.5 hours about it. Not to mention, Amber and I have been discussing, you know, the 700 things that are in this bill. So there are a lot. This is everything but the kitchen sink education bill. They fix a little bit of everything in this. So,
And Rebekah, last we checked, weren't we close to 2,000 bills that have been filed for this session just in the House?
yes, there are 2,000 bills, that are filed. So everybody's reading, you know, a ton of stuff. Everybody's trying to be in that. And people like Step Up are only going to support or read bills that have to do with Step Up. So other groups are covering all kinds of things. So I try to read a variety. There's more than just these issues. So Brenda,
Right.
you know, there's more than education issues that are in the legislature. So there's a lot of things that are going on at one time with it. So yes, there are 1,783 bills, and 303 of them reference education. 303 bills this session reference education. So just think about that. This is like 6 lines in thousands of pages.
Rebekah, I'm glad you spoke up because I felt like you were sitting there for a while and I was like, I really want to include you. As a follow-up to what you just said, what are some of the key concerns you're looking for? You're a PEP parent. You're a home education parent as well. So you have a child that is not on PEP and then you have a child that is. Talk to me from your perspective, what are some of the key concerns you're watching for?
I think I want to make sure that as we're doing this, we're writing policy basically for the whole nation. No one else has done this. No one else but Florida truly has school choice like we have it. And as we're doing this, there's going to have to be some give and take. You cannot have state funds without some sort of accountability. As much as we want that, there's going to be some sort of accountability. Okay. There are concerns on the legislators from people. We're talking about, there's prosecutors, there's all kinds of people on these education committees, and they're coming, like Amber said, from different parts. So you'll have someone say, well, what about human trafficking in this? So you've got to sit and listen to that side of it. What about this? What about this? How are we protecting children? We've got to understand that although we sometimes see this little bit, we've got to be able to think the whole thing. So when we're writing education bill, it affects every single family in Florida. When we do something, it affects public school, private school, homeschool students. All right. Those were the 3 main categories. But now the funding, the way things are going, is affecting every family basically. And so you have to understand, like Amber was saying, that there are going to be some decisions that have to be made that might not be what you want or even what we can advocate for in good conscience, because we also want to make sure that your freedoms, I feel very strongly that we keep parental rights in the forefront. And if something is going to hinder my parental rights, I don't want to take the money. But
Agreed.
I do want the money to be is valuable to families. It's a way for even a mom to be able to stay home and homeschool because they're able to get those funds to pay for it. So it is a way to help families. but I want to protect as much as we can. So protecting parents' rights is number one. In everything we do, we want to protect parents' rights. And part of that, of protecting parents' rights, is sometimes, we're going to probably talk here in a minute about the private school, umbrella school issue. Sometimes to protect those rights, we're not going to be able to fund it a certain way. And the statutes are very detailed. I mean, Brenda, I feel like I've been around for a long time, but I remember when Brenda and them were writing these original homeschool statutes. Like, this did not just happen. This is 20 years of people standing at the gate and watching. More than 20 years. Brenda, how long has it been? More than 20 years.
It's probably 40, right?
Yeah.
Is it 40?
1985.
We started it in 1984. We started working on creating a pathway for parents to teach their children at home.
Right. So you started working on that 3 years before I was born, and I started. My birthday was late, so 9 years before we started homeschooling, maybe 8 years, and because I remember even back then the climate, and we talked about this in our long call the other day. The climate even back then was not so supportive. Like, it was more of an uphill battle. Now people are like, "Oh, hey, I'm going to homeschool," and everybody's like, "Well, okay," like.
Right.
Whereas before, it's like everyone was taken aback, and they're like, really, you're really gonna do that, so like, you've been working on that all this time. And like Rebekah said something the other day when she and I were talking, and I think we were both talking about it, but I think she was the first one to say it. Anything legislatively is a long game. All of it is and I mean right now we have the supermajority happening and all of that. So, and with Governor DeSantis, there's stuff getting pushed through at rapid speed. Now, it doesn't feel rapid to the people that have not engaged in this before, but like, it's a long game, and we can't be so short-sighted or so selfish as to only look at what we want out of this. Like, what do we want out of this little part? Like Rebekah was saying, how does this connect to everything else? Because truly, if we step back, no parent wants to lose freedoms for money. Like, that's just so, and that's kind of what, with the funding, sometimes people can lose sight of that. But I thought Rebekah's point, this is a long game, is so important to remember. And it's hard if you haven't engaged, because sometimes people engage and they're like, I've been doing this for 2 months and I've seen no results. And it's like, you have people that have been doing it for 2, 3, 4 decades. And it's taking time to see results. So
love you, Brenda.
and I want to interject. It's come a long way. I was homeschooled, I say, in the dark ages, before it was cool, when, like, in the 80s. I was homeschooled in the 80s, and we had monthly DCF visits. I was in New York. We had DCF came by every month to make sure, randomly. I still, to this day, I have a brother that's 15 years younger than me. I still, to this day, remember my mom was giving him a bath, and they came and knocked on the door, and the DCF lady was there, and my little brother comes streaking by in front of the DCF, because we just never knew when they were going to show up. It was part of my childhood that DCF was going to show up. Pretend like you're learning, guys. No, just kidding. Like, we would have our school out. We would work every day, because it was a different mentality. It wasn't, we would do that. So Brenda, thank you, because can you imagine that? We would consider that harassment now, but that's just how it was.
Right. It's a big shift in kind of default disposition toward what home education is. And I think a lot of that's due to
Let me put in a plug here, because as y'all are talking about what people understand and don't understand, one of the reasons that I have been successful is because I'm there every session. People know I'm a voice for home education, and they listen. And
the consistency, so key. That consistency is so key.
It is so critical. And that's why we're trying to bring Amber and Jason on as the voice along with me, because we want this to be the long game. We want to protect parents' rights into the future. And unfortunately, it's time for me to move on.
Not yet.
But I feel really confident with them being here. They're doing a fantastic job. There's a lot to learn, but we're in the process of walking them through how things work, and who do you contact, and how do you work with staff, and all of those things. So and I don't usually push for support for myself, but I'm going to push for support for the Home Education Foundation people. You can't be here because you're teaching your children at home, and we're here every day. So if you want the
I am
consistency
now.
and you want the voice in the Capitol, Jason's children need to eat. So, and they're hard
It'd
to
be
eaters.
nice.
They're hard to eaters.
They
But
are.
the other point I want to make is, and this was something in response to what I believe Amber said in the beginning, is it's not us and them. It's not a situation where Republicans are always right. It's harder for me to oppose a Republican bill than it is to oppose a Democrat bill. But what I've found in the legislatures, I've made lots of friends with Democrats over the years. They're people. They come in with views and they are representing their constituents. And yes, we don't always agree on those issues, but if I sit down with each one of them, which I typically do, prior to each time a bill is heard in committee, I try to make contact. This happened too fast and we weren't able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But in a regular session, when we're working on the bills through the committee process, beginning a couple of months before the session actually starts, I make a point of going to every member of the committee and saying to them, here's what the bill does. It's not going to affect your money as far as the Democrats are concerned. Do you have any issues with this bill that we can discuss? And generally, I can't think of committees where we've not had 100% agreement on the bill with both Republicans and Democrats. We've had almost unanimous support on the floor when a bill has come up on the floor. That's because I treat them with respect. I want to hear what they have to say. And if they have a valid point, we try to make some amendment to the bill to make it work for everybody. And so I don't have a us and them mentality. And many times we can go to Democrats and ask them to ask hard questions that we wouldn't want to ask in the committee. So there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, as they say, but mine is working with people and giving them the respect. And I've shared some of the things that have happened in the past where God has just intervened and I got opportunities that there's no way I could have done myself. And so I believe God's hands on this movement. But as Rebekah said, if you're going to take government money, there are going to be some regulations, because if you're a Republican and you're a fiscal conservative, you don't want giving out taxpayer dollars without making sure they're spent appropriately. So the hard part is finding that balance.
Well, you talked about sorry. I thought you were done.
Yep, that's okay.
Okay. As you talked about there being more than one way to skin a cat, but I think we should talk about the elephant in the room, or maybe it's more of a horse, as Tomko put it. Everybody's wondering about instructional materials. That segue was terrible. I'm sorry. She talked about
consensus. We've got to get consensus in our community as well, consensus with the legislators. So yes.
So there are, when Tomko spoke about instructional materials, which is one of the big things a lot of people are worried about. That was one of the things that Michelle's question was about earlier. She spoke about, being able to purchase horse riding lessons, but not be able to buy the horse. And that many people thought that was disingenuous because you already couldn't buy a live animal with the funds, which is fine. But I think that if you step that point back, there are important things to consider on all ends. I think maybe we should break that open a little bit, talk about what the legislators are trying to accomplish and what it is that we're lobbying for. So do you want to take that, Brenda, or Amber, or Rebekah? Would you like to talk about what's important to you first, or maybe what you're seeing from the legislators?
I was just thinking that it may be beneficial, because a lot of people, if they're not that have not been familiar with the process did not really understand that there was an amendment and how that amendment changed anything, because it just looked like a few words were switched around.
Right. Yep. Go ahead.
Before that amendment, it was any type of instructional material could only be used for those 4 or 5 categories that they listed. They've changed the wording around to now say equipment as instructional materials. So it's now not all instructional materials. It's only the subcategory of equipment can only be approved for those 4 or 5. And I feel like that's a big difference, because a lot of people that looked at that are like, I think that's where a lot of people have been disheartened. So that was a really positive change. I've tried to think of what percentage to put that on, but in my mind, that fixed about 65% of the issue. The remaining 35% is highly important, but I think that we should take a moment to like understand and help people understand that was a big deal. And that was done before the committee. That was filed before the committee, so it was online. Anybody could see it. But it was brought up in committee and adopted in committee.
I'm sorry, I'm reading a comment.
That's an important point you just made. And I've seen this happen numerous times in the session. People don't look at the amendments that are filed to the bill before they come and rant on the bill itself, or come to the third committee when it's been changed in the committees, and they rant on the first bill. And it isn't appropriate, because it makes them look uninformed and it doesn't help the cause. So you can go online, and when you pull up the bill, you can see the amendments that are added to the bill before the committee. And then you are informed when you come and speak.
Right.
And
Brenda, the other issue that Rebekah and I have seen a lot of times is you'll have people referencing, they'll say, well, Bill 1289, but that was Bill 1289 3 years ago that passed into law and is now a statute. And 1289 is now about garbage collection, whereas before it was about education. And so they're still talking about it, and it looks so bad. And so it's just for people to understand that every single session, including special sessions, those same numbers are allotted to a different bill. Yeah. And I feel like that's very helpful information.
Can I interject this too?
Yeah, let me 1 second. Let me just hit a comment real quick. Katie Lane says she has to go, loves the session, especially having another unicorn family. Here to that. And then Risa Robinson says, any idea what they may do if a curriculum you purchase includes the materials needed to complete the curriculum? That question highlights the importance of, I don't think everyone understands the practical implications of, how it's going to play out for them personally as well. So maybe as we move forward, incorporate that into our answer. Sorry, go ahead, Rebekah.
Oh, I was just going to make a point. What Amber was saying, HB1 was education last year, but HB1 this year is about the internet and child grooming. Like, it's a total different. So when you say HB1 now, it's not even relating to the same thing. So that's very important too.
And I just wanted to add to that, that it's important to understand that each subcommittee or committee has its own focus that they're looking at. So even if HB1403 is still moving forward through the committees and subcommittees, the issues that were spoken on at the Choice and Innovation Subcommittee aren't the same issues that are going to be addressed or could be spoken on at the Appropriations Subcommittee that's coming up. So I've had a lot of parents, after I spoke at the last subcommittee, I've had a lot of parents reaching out to me like, you've inspired me, I want to come speak on this instructional materials issue. But it's important to understand that the reason I was able to read the speech, and they let me read the speech that I'd written at the last one, was because that was the choice and innovation, and I was addressing the freedom of choice that I wanted for my kids. And I do still have concerns that 35% that Amber is referencing, I'm not sure how they're going to define equipment or what they're going to say fits under equipment versus general instructional materials, and how that's going to play out. So that is why HEF has been working on some wording to propose to clarify a lot of those things.
Because when we went in, sorry.
But I was just gonna say, for parents who are wanting to have a voice on this, please understand that whatever you come in person to speak at for a subcommittee needs to be directly relevant to the focus of that subcommittee. So the next one that's coming up is appropriations, which is payment and financial aspects. So we put out an all call asking for any parents who had issues with delay in funding or problems with getting reimbursements for PEP or UA. Any of those payment related concerns are perfect for this next subcommittee because those things can be added as amendments into the bill to address those still. But the instructional materials concern, maybe not the best topic to try to go into this next subcommittee with.
Sure. While we're on the
For
topic,
instance,
go ahead.
I was just going to say really quick, for instance, like the fact that they're changing so that renewal families have to get funds in their account by August 1st. Again, another positive that nobody's really talking about. But that could be something like, hey, last year we didn't get the funds till the middle of the semester and we couldn't get reimbursed and those types of things. Like that could be very relevant to that. So there's just to your point.
Well, let me
Absolutely.
just say that is the August 1st deadline is for private schools. We are HEF. We're pushing for that to be added to that language to be added to the FESUA and to the PEP program because I think it's important that parents have that money prior to the start of their school year so they can line up therapists, they can line up their classes. If they don't have that money and they have to wait till everything else is filled, that's going to be difficult for them to get services that they need for their children. So that's something that we're working on that nobody else has mentioned.
And those are
go ahead.
I was just going to say those are perfect issues to address as a parent if you wanted to come speak at this upcoming
this one.
Things like that.
And I think just to clarify, I think we established in our meeting from Saturday that UA, the unique abilities, is covered by the August 1st deadline, but
yes,
PEP is not.
And we had written, we drafted some language between Saturday and now to address that. But I just want parents to understand if you're still concerned about the instructional materials issue, it's still going after the appropriations committee to the education and employment committee, which is a perfect opportunity. We have some parents who were concerned about equipment for career and technical skills and trade skills for students in high school. That would be a perfect subcommittee to come speak
to revisit the same thing.
And you can still reach out to your representatives in between the committees because they can file amendments before it goes to the next subcommittee. You don't have to come in person to reach out and communicate your concerns.
Because that language, I'm sorry, go ahead, Rebekah.
Oh, I was just also going to say, that's what the kind of things we're doing on the back end. Like Amber did extensive research to find out what the definition by statute is instructional materials. So we have a statute definition. It's in our law, what instructional materials, but there is not a definition anywhere for equipment. So it doesn't say equipment means this, and this. So you have to understand on the back end too, it takes extensive tons of hours of research. Amber's like the research queen. She will go find, and Brenda knows all this. Like Brenda will be like statute, blah, 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 blah. Like, wait a minute. Wait, let me go look that up. She knows them from heart. But Amber will go and look and say, hey, look, there's PE requirements here. How can we fix this by statute that's already here? How can we tell the legislators, this isn't right? We can't just say this is wrong. We have to say, I always say it's like a coffee shop. Legislation is like like going to a coffee shop. You go up to the barista and they give you the wrong coffee. You just don't say this is the wrong coffee. They're going to say, why is it the wrong coffee? Well, you forgot to add milk. It's black. It's obviously black coffee. I asked for this and they'll say, oh, okay, let me see what I can do to fix that. You know what I mean? Sometimes they can just pour milk in. Sometimes they have to make you a whole new latte. So you just have to,
Well, and to go to what you're saying, Rebekah, and also what Brenda said about different ways to skin a cat. For instance, in this particular instance, some people might be like, well, that line shouldn't even be in there at all. It shouldn't say only those. Okay, that's one way to fix it. But if that line is important to them, another way to fix it is to say that equipment can only be used in, and then add in the other subjects that are important or the other areas that are important and back that up with statute. So to be very practical, there's a lot of different ways to handle that,
you said if that line is important to them. So that was something that I don't think we've talked about yet on our stream. is the what is important to them thing. I want to talk about that, but first I want to directly address Risa and Michelle's questions. So Michelle's question was, do you think there's a difference in definition between supplies and equipment with regards to the terminology in the bill? And if so, are you working to have clarifying language added to the bill? Brenda or Amber, I could speak to it, but I feel like I've been hogging a lot of the time, so I want to give y'all all the chance to talk.
Yes, we're working on it.
There you go.
We don't have
Yeah.
a solution yet,
Yeah.
but
We
we
do think
spent a
there's a
lot of time looking at options and what would be
Mhm.
the best language to serve the community. One of the things that we don't like that we're trying to put into statute is language which would limit the power of the SFOs, because we have such a wide span between AAA and Step Up. AAA will almost not approve anything that is not directly tied to a curriculum. Well, that's not home education.
I think you said
And then
that a
the
little.
other extreme is Step Up for Students that's been over backwards trying to accommodate every parent's request. And some of those things I personally don't think are good things for them to approve. But there's nothing in statute that limits their power to make those decisions. And so it's confusing for parents. So what we want, and we may or may not get it, but what we're asking for is that all of the things that are approved for the scholarship be specific in statute. And then you have the same approvals for whatever the subjects are that both the SFOs have to comply with. But just
So
leaving it wide open for them to make the choices hasn't worked out very well.
I want to clarify something, because the way that you stated it when you first started, you said one of the things we don't like, and then you started talking about limiting the SFO's power. That is not what we don't like.
Well,
Just want to
you're
be
right.
clear. What we don't like is the authority and power placed on the SFOs and their overreach. We are seeking language that will limit their power and give that power to parents and legislation. So just wanted
Can
to
I just throw this in, because I had
Please,
worked
Amber.
on this a lot, and Brenda threw out the letters SFO the other day, and I was like, I did not know what SFO was. So for those at home listening, it's Student Funding Organization, correct? I have that correct.
Scholarship funding.
Scholarship funding.
Scholarship funding. See, I still didn't have
Yeah.
it correct. So
And those are Step Up and AAA.
Yes,
and I
for
knew
now.
about Step Up in AAA, but I didn't know about SFO. So, it's so funny, because sometimes we're like moving, and I think that happens a lot in the legislature. You're moving through the
Right.
process and terms are thrown out, and people are like, wait, what was that? Sometimes even the people
Right.
that are trying to be educated in the matter. So
Thank you for interjecting and clarifying that. You're absolutely right. Yes.
Yes. What we don't like is the freedom of decision making for the SFOs, because it's not consistent.
And it
Yes, even within the SFOs,
mucks
it's
up the
not
process.
consistent. From processor
So-
to processor, they may approve something for one parent and not another. So our goal is to streamline all of that by specifying in statute what categories of purchases are covered, and then just giving freedom to parents to choose within that without the micromanagement from the SFOs.
which,
And
quite
And,
frankly,
Michelle-
should also make it easier for them as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
We
And
know
it
it's going
should
to
make
make parents get
process
their
a lot
money
quicker.
faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michelle chimed in and said, particularly for UA, I don't see how you could possibly spell out every single thing covered specifically. I think it's important to realize we're not necessarily trying to spell out everything that could be specifically covered. What we're trying to do is align what we're asking for with what the legislators are seeking to do with the bill, so that it provides broad guidelines.
Can I chime in on
For-
that real quick?
Go ahead.
So already there are categories in statute for what is approved, but the SFOs have been given a lot of leeway within those categories to decide what qualifies or does not. The wording that we are working on would specify those categories in statute, which for UA is already pretty well specified. it's PEP that we're looking to add clarity, especially with this new introduction of the line for instructional materials. We're looking to add the elective subjects to that list to make sure they're included for equipment. And then we were also
And
looking
digital
to add in
devices.
school supplies, digital devices, a few other things to make sure that they're included. And then we are proposing a line that would limit the SFOs from imposing any restrictions not already limited in statute. So the result we're going for in the end is that parents have the freedom to make the choice of what falls within those categories rather than the SFOs. And as long as it can be reasonably argued that it falls within those categories, the SFOs cannot impose spending caps or limitations or any other restrictions other than what's already in statute.
And
So
we have
it
to
actually
correct.
would give more freedom to parents is
So,
what we're trying to go for.
And
so
we
trying
have to
to
craft
limit
it.
the SFOs from having the freedom to do that, not limit the amount of not limit the parents. It's actually trying to broaden the authority of the parents and limit the authority of the SFOs.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the
Right.
wording we're working on.
And we have to be
it came
careful.
about when they arbitrarily put caps on certain categories, and the things in the category really didn't fit in the categories.
Right. There's that too. And we have to be careful as we mention things, though. Brenda has talked about this before, where the statutory construct is such that when you spell things out specifically, it's assumed that you thought of all the things, and these were the ones. Anything not mentioned is therefore excluded. So we're having to be careful as we mention them. Great point. You can't possibly list every single thing. So we're trying to write it in a way that's broad enough to accomplish that, but then also narrow enough to accomplish what the legislators are really going for, which we haven't yet talked about, and I want to get to real quick because we are up on we're at 1 o'clock, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Well,
we still need to
let's
discuss
shift for a
umbrella
minute
schools.
because we're running out of time
Okay.
on advertising the other thing that HEF is working on. We
Sure
are
enough.
really, really interested in helping parents find ways for their children to get into a career without having to go to college. And we all know the pros and cons of college. So what we have done is we've partnered with Skills. We've partnered with Tampa Bay Homeschool something. I can't remember what it is. And
Homeschool Conference.
Trinity Homeschool Organization to put on a discovery day where parents and their child can come to the Skills facility, which is in Holiday, that's north of Tampa, and see the types of careers in manufacturing and actually get the opportunity to hands-on 3D printers and all of the other things that are being used in manufacturing. And people hear the word manufacturing and they think about people putting something on a widget on a line as they're going through. That is so far from what it is that we're talking about, that you need to just come and let your child see it, because it opens a whole world of opportunity, especially for those kids that are hands-on learners. And many of those kids are geniuses. They just don't fit in the traditional school system. So we're trying to showcase, this is our first opportunity to showcase something that we think is super valuable for kids to know about. We're exploring other opportunities, but this is going to be from 9:30 to 4:30 on January 26th in Holiday, and there's a link on our flhef.org website with all the details.
Yes.
And I highly encourage you to advertise. We can only take, is it 30 kids and one parent? Jason, do you remember the cutoff?
It is, I believe it's 35.
35 kids. And
but we already have like over 10 or more. Last I checked was before, I think maybe before the move even, there were only 10 left. And so, or sorry, there were 10 taken up. So they're going quickly, and it's the 26th. So it's coming up quick if you want.
Please spread the word among your friends and communities so that there is a place they can stay nearby. And those rooms have been filled, but there still is a hotel there. So somebody has a
Mhm.
camper trailer, they have camping places. So I just think it's a unique opportunity that we've
It is.
arranged for kids to see some careers. And I really want us to focus on that more. But this is our first
Absolutely.
exciting opportunity.
Yeah. And you know what? We may need to have Amber and Rebekah on again to finish the other whole half of our conversation that we didn't even get to. I want to read a couple of comments real quickly, though. Joining late. Is there any movement about digital devices? We mentioned that, yes. You guys really aren't getting the credit you deserve. My goodness. Oh, thank you, Heather, for saying that. Let's see. Do instructional material portion have the potential to change? Yes, that's what we've been talking about. Debbie Tharp says, what I've confirmed today is I'm in kindergarten and HEF has 3 PhDs. So I will just keep financially supporting HEF because I trust you guys. Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Debbie, for saying that. We appreciate you. The legislators, they have a need, right? They're getting embarrassing emails about parents who have spent their funds on things that they're getting shamed for being exorbitant expenditures, right? They're trying to buy the horse and the not literally but figuratively, and they're trying to put a bumper bowling. They're trying to put lanes in to curb that out. So that if everybody's wondering what it is they're trying to do, it is ultimately that. And there have been, oh man, Crystal and I have both, and combing through Facebook, seen some of the posts where, sure enough, like people are buying wild items, and somehow they're getting approved. So they're looking to curb that.
Yeah,
And they're also looking to streamline the process for the scholarship funding organizations, because that whole approval process and approving every little thing is gumming up the works, so to speak, and keeping the funds from being delivered in a timely manner to families. So they're trying to accomplish both of those things.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Crystal.
Just to add to that, a representative from the subcommittee came up to me afterwards and thanked me for speaking, and specifically told me that he wanted me to understand that the reason that they had proposed this language in the first place was because they had brought to their attention instances of PEP parents irresponsibly using the funds. And so that was what was given to me as the explanation for why they were trying to address some limitations on what could be purchased. And obviously, given the language that they introduced, it was equipment that their concern was about. These things that are falling in, equipment purchase that they felt wasn't legitimately needed for educational purposes, but parents were somehow sliding it in under instructional materials.
Because everything was there.
Yeah, because
literally
in
everything.
Step Up's guide, 90% of the purchasing guide is instructional materials. They've put almost everything under that category in their guide. And so as we've been working on language, we're trying to make sure that we are also addressing that concern that they have for responsible use of the funds and some measure of accountability, while also preserving as much freedom for parents as possible in this process.
So I guess oh, I'm sorry, Amber. I was just going to say.
No, I was going to throw a question to you, Rebekah. So
I'll go for it. Go.
I was just going to say, I was just going to ask if you could explain a little bit about the research that you did to try to establish what is educational that this other school, whether it's private or public, have access to, that's not just that core curricula, but also the extracurriculars and the things that are required even just to graduate. Like, can you touch on that? Because I feel like that's really important to this.
So the part that, that's the reason that line is in there, because people have had all kinds of crazy stuff or asked for crazy things.
You called it crazy, not me.
Yeah, people will post pictures on Facebook and say, how can I get this approved? And it's a mannequin,
yes,
or a mixing bowl. I mean, where does it go? So we want to protect it for the people. So there are credits you need to graduate from high school. You need elective credits. And some of those electives are going to need certain instructional materials that go with it.
Right.
Also, physical education is a required credit. Fine arts is a required credit to graduate from high school. So
Mhm.
fine arts covers everything. And, you know, and also I'm on the State Board of Music Education. When you look at some of these courses, music is considered an essential class. Okay. It's not considered an elective. It's considered an essential class when it's in the code. So there are things that we have to look that we can say, hey, we want to make sure that we're not, and I hate to use the word discrimination, but it is almost discrimination to say a private school can use this money to buy things for their PE class. We are required to take this PE class. We need things for this
Mhm.
PE class. We are required to take a fine arts class. We either need to be able to rent an instrument and get paid for it, or be able to be a part of a choir that requires a uniform. You know, that's where we need to be able to prove and say that. So I guess the
Right.
two sides are make sure you're not abusing it. I mean,
Yes.
and also I like to throw this out here. Amber brought this up the other day. Listen, if they don't approve it, it's not costing the government any money. They still have to give us our amount of money. It's going to roll over to an education account. You know, it's not actually saving them money for them not to approve this. I don't think
Right.
you understand that. It's
And
just,
I think that's where it's easier to get the legislators to be willing to add this in when you can show in other statutes or like you said, the standards, hey, this stuff is here and it's not like
Mhm.
this is limiting the money. Like I think that's a very
Right.
good point to them.
Yeah, that's
And
an
that's what's
excellent.
setting a
And
precedent.
I also, as Jason and Brenda and I were working on some wording last night that we
Mhm.
dropped into the document that we're all working together. Um, one of my concerns was as we're referring to these statutes that define what physical education is and what's, these credits that are required for graduation or diploma in school. I also want to make sure that the language that we're proposing makes it clear that parents do not have to go take those classes at a public school in order to qualify for purchasing the accompanying equipment under PEP
Right.
funds. Because
Right.
even though that was suggested as a solution in the subcommittee, it is not feasible for every PEP family, or
Mhm.
even maybe feasible, but just not what their family really needs.
Yeah.
We are not, as a PEP family, we're not interested in necessarily enrolling our kids. Right now, we can't because they're not old enough to even qualify for the extracurriculars at a
Right.
public school district. But we use a lot of resources at home or through home education instructional programs, and we don't want those restrictions to force parents to have to enroll at a public school district to get access to those subject
Well,
materials.
and the public school system could not handle the influx if 100% of families did that, or even 25% of families
Right.
did that. Like they're not able to handle that. So
Yeah, and
Mhm.
so I just want parents to know that these are all things that
Sure.
are part of our discussion as we're working on this
Yes.
wording.
And the situation with the gentleman tried to buy a microscope, which, I mean, that just seems like a no-brainer to me, but it wasn't attached to a curriculum, so it wasn't allowed to be purchased. We're trying to avoid mishaps like that as well, something that is a very justifiable expense for education that doesn't necessarily have to be tied to that specific course for you to get it, because we also know that our kids like to go grab anything and throw it under a microscope.
Yeah,
Sometimes stuff we don't want them to grab and throw it under a microscope.
and that's where that
and I
And
think
language
there's no
restrict
curriculum.
that's where that language restricting the SFOs from applying any additional limitations is important. So if we can get it
because
in statute what's approved and then limit the scholarship funding organizations from arbitrarily deciding that something doesn't qualify.
So
and I
Tracy from
think Brenda
FPEA makes a valid point. I want to touch this real quick before we go too much further. She says, please clarify that we as homeschoolers do not need these classes for our students to graduate. That's true. However, what we're trying to do in statute form is reference them as a valid and accepted part of statute in other places as a setting a precedent for their inclusion
Yes.
in
So we're
these.
not asking for them to put them in statute as required for homeschoolers or
Correct.
PEP. We are
Right.
referencing the existing statutes as our argument for why they should not be excluded from the subject areas for which instructional materials, equipment used as instructional
Could be
material
applied to.
is
Right.
allowed.
And the whole discussion on how homeschoolers graduate is a whole different can of worms. So just
Yeah.
You want to come back?
different discussion. That's a whole nother hour. So I guess what I want to say is these issues are all complicated and we are all working through it. And because you see 6 lines, there are people, I guess this is the part I want everyone to realize. There are people out there who are holding the feet to the fire and are doing the research on it. We can't all take the time to do it, nor do we have the expertise. Like Amber's worked for a law firm before. She understands doing that. You know, I've read law. I got paid to read laws at one point. So all I'm saying is not everyone can do that. You have to always understand too that there are people, that these 5 people and more than that, who are sitting down, taking the time, trying to think through it. And if something ends up, it's not because we didn't know about it or it slipped through or was an oops. It was, we are trying to be very intentional to keep freedoms and to protect all of our homeschoolers, protect whether you have PEP or not. So you just have to, I hate to say, trust us. No, I'm not saying that. Read the bill, figure out what you think. If you can read it all and find all the statutes and pull it all in and find a good solution for it, we'll try to do it. But don't feel like if we say that's not going to work because of this blah, 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 blah statute. Hey, they shoot me down all the time. I have great ideas and no one listens to me because
I think
on a daily basis.
We're listening, Rebekah.
But I think to your point, nothing is ever over and nothing is ever static. If you have something really good in statute, you can't just assume that's going to be there for 20 years. You have to watch it. If you have something really bad, work to change it. Like I almost feel like it's like the, Scarlet on Gone with the Wind. Tomorrow is another day. Like we can't fix it all today, but we can take the, bites of the elephant each day.
And we
are
trying to with that.
Yeah. Cara Patricia says, I really appreciate all that HEF is doing. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to help. I'm happy to volunteer some hours tracking down statutes, etc. You know what you can do that would be extremely helpful is last I checked, the numbers were over 150,000 for students in Florida that are home educating students. Spread the word. We have a good number of people on the stream today, but we don't have anywhere near 150,000. And we support the work that we do goes to protect the rights of those families, to make those decisions for their children, the parents to direct the education in ways they see fit, to protect those who are even taking scholarships from too much oversight. We're very careful and vigilant in watching the laws, pouring and combing through them, sacrificing our time. I just want to go kiss my kids and play dodgeball or something because I really want to throw balls at my kids. But it's a great stress relief. If you haven't done it, you should try it. But we make I'm kidding. We make sacrifices. And we do this so that every one of those students and every one of those families can feel confident. They can take that deep breath and have that sigh of relief and know that there's someone sitting in Tallahassee that's literally watching these bills and combing through them and fighting for them. Spread the word. Share the streams. Share the information. Share the forums. Help us. We do still need support. So if you can point them to our website, the Support Us tab is very easy to find. We are still in need of that. So spread the word, allow them all to access these streams that we do. We're going to continue to do them. We're here as a resource for them as well as continuing to do the lobbying work. I am officially now registered as a home education lobbyist. Thank you, Brenda. So it's real and happening. And if there is any help that you could give, we would really appreciate that. We need the additional exposure. I sat with I don't think you'll mind me saying, Andy, and he was like, I had no idea who you were. And he showed up to help testify at the committee. And it was like, wow, didn't even know who Brenda was, right? Like they imagine that. and he's right down the street, right? So help us get the word out, help us get the exposure, share it to your page, share it within your friend groups, your co-ops, your umbrellas, whatever you're a part of, your home
Facebook
education
pages.
instructional programs, your Facebook pages. Just help us share and help. And because we do still need to raise the support that we need, and we're working on that. We've tried to make it extremely easy for people to support, but that is one massive way to do it. All right, we do need to pull things to a close, as we told Amber and Rebekah that we would end at 1, and it's almost 1:20. So I want to very quickly go around, and you get 1 minute for a recap. The one thing that you want to say, 1 minute, 60 seconds. We're going to go around and just state what it is that what's your takeaway for people either listening or your takeaway that you got. You can share something from today just to recap it. Go. Amber, we'll start with you. Do you want to start, Amber?
Oh.
Let me ask. No, I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, I just think I think that this is a really good point for people to see of it's great that you're engaging in this process. Don't only engage this one time and then get discouraged if you hear something that's difficult or whatever. Take the time, like sit in and click on watch one of the committee meetings. You can watch this next upcoming committee meeting. You can track this bill. You can sign up for a notice every time a movement happens on this bill for you to be able to go and check it out. So just don't get discouraged with that. There is a value to engaging in this process. You do not have to love politics to love the legislative process, and laws affect our daily lives. So like, don't be discouraged about that. Be encouraged. And also the things that people are so worried about with this equipment for instruction material, I truly believe in my heart that is going to be fixed before this bill comes out. So we're working on that. Obviously that's not all within, but like, I feel like if everybody could just kind of take a little bit of that stress and a little bit of that threatening feeling off and just realize it's not over. This is a very active process.
Good. Deep breath. That was good. Crystal, we'll go to you next, and then Rebekah, and then Brenda.
So I guess I would say just be aware of the process and where the bill is in its different steps, and engage in the ways that make sense at that point in the process. Because I've been seeing a lot of parents, like I said, who want to come speak, but the issue that they want to speak about may not be one that falls under the appropriations subcommittee. It doesn't mean that you still can't call an email for right now and then prepare yourself to come speak at the next one if you have something that's relevant to education and employment. So if you have questions about where things are in the process, you can always reach out to us, but I want your voices to be heard and not dismissed. And that's my concern. If you try to propose something that doesn't fit the focus of the next subcommittee, they may not be willing to hear you out. And I want you to be heard. So that's
very good. And you're just under time. That's perfect. That's a great takeaway from today. That's great. Rebekah.
Okay, I guess I want to say, first of all, you're not alone. We're here to help you. We are here. You can message HSLD. You can do whatever. And I want to point out that Amber and I are just, at this point in our life, stay-at-home moms. We're just moms. We are you that are concerned about it. We've come to this point in our life where we've gone through things that God has given us the ability and the opportunity and to do some of this, and we want to do it. We're here to help you. So sometimes I think we get isolated and think no one is doing this. Like even Amber and I, even though we have each other and we talk to each other, we'll be like, no one else cares like we care. So we care as much as you care. We know as you as a mom are worried about these issues. You care enough to want to go to committee. We care too. We're here to help. That's what this stream is about, to help you and educate and be there to support in the way that we can help.
Thank you.
Hey,
Perfect.
Jason,
yes,
I'm so sorry. Can I say just one more really quick thing?
Yes, you may.
If you're going to contact your state representative or your senator or any of them, and you're going to email them, they are inundated right now with things. So you want to, 1, come in and say something you're thankful for. 2, tell exactly what the problem is. 3, tell exactly what the fix is. And basically 4, have a nice day. You don't want to tell them your whole life story. They don't have time. It's not that they don't even care. There just isn't time. So like, pleasant, in and out, exactly what you need.
Well, you can
Bullet.
have my time because that's exactly what I
I'm
was going to
so sorry.
say as my takeaway. No, don't apologize. It's probably better
Bullets.
coming from you.
No
were
more
great.
than 4 bullets.
Yeah.
All right,
In large
Brenda.
print.
Brenda, 60 seconds. What's your takeaway from today?
I had it before we discussed this. I want to say that we have people email us about certain bills and say, you know, this one I saw. We appreciate the input because we can't read 2,000 bills. So if you pick up something that you see as a problem, please let us know. We're working literally day and night to try to fix the things we're aware of. But if you pick up something that you see that's problematic in another bill, please let us know. And we may need to, you know, add that to our list of things to try to address. So we do appreciate your input, and knowing what your problems are, help us know what we need to try to fix. So thank you for your engagement.
Yes. And I will say this to end it up. I do moderate and monitor the Facebook page, and it is my goal to make the Facebook page and the forum itself a community that is safe from bad actors. I do not mind dissenting opinions, and I do not mind. I think that what is the Bible verse? Iron sharpens iron. One person sharpens another. That's a pretty brutal process. Blacksmithing is brutal, and I think sometimes it's difficult for us to have those conversations, and those difficult conversations need to be had and need to be hashed out. So there's absolutely nothing about that that's on the chopping block or the ban list, but bad actors won't be tolerated. So people who come in just to stir up strife, it's not going to be there. You can all come and you can all feel safe that what you post is going to be listened to, and that what you share is going to be heard, and that if conversations take place, they're going to be polite and amenable, and we can all disagree in ways that can help us try to find unity at the end of the day and come with a united voice that protects home education families. But bad actors won't be tolerated. So that's all I want to say at the end. I think it's going to be a little bit more peaceful around the Facebook page as we move forward. We love our UA families. We love our PEP families. We love our home education families. And we love all the families who have not yet decided to home educate because maybe they just don't know what their rights are. So that being said, I think it's time to bring today's stream to a close. Amber, thank you so much for being with us. Rebekah, you as well. It has been awesome hearing from you and having the time to spend with you and pour over these things. And I love the collaboration that we're doing on coming up with the language. Everyone who has mentioned in the last series of comments, I know I didn't get specifically to your questions, but are we working on language? Yes, we are working on language. Yes, we are putting things out there. And a lot of pretty much everything that you have posted are things that are on our radar and of our concern. So just keep watching the Facebook page and the forum, and we'll keep you updated on the things that we're working on as we move forward. Is there anything else?
I think we'll need to have Amber and Rebekah back on to discuss the
Yes.
other half of our
Officially
conversation
invited
today.
back next week. Yes, if you can. Because a continuation of that conversation, there's a whole other half of the conversation we didn't get to. So I'd love to see that. So you're definitely invited back. Anything
I think
else?
we need to tell them what it is. We want to talk about
Okay.
Good.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, sometimes people think we don't talk about or consider what is familiarly referred to in our community as umbrella schools.
Mm-hmm.
We spent a lot of time on Saturday discussing the pros and cons of including them in the PEP. So we're always looking to protect their rights. We may not specifically address it because it's not something that fits in that particular bill, but we do want to talk about that. Even that's not the other half of the conversation I want it to be.
Yeah. So bullet point list off what's on the list for the other part of the conversation. It is umbrella schools and
I thought it was just umbrella schools.
Oh,
That's
was
the
it just umbrella school? I know there was more.
Well, and
Okay.
there will also have been at least one more committee meeting that has happened by then, and
Yes.
some meetings with legislators. There's a lot of conversations planned. I know we have a lot of conversations planned for Tuesday with some of
Yes.
our specific contacts and all of that. So I think there's probably going to be a lot that happens within the next week that will probably add to that as well.
100%. Grab your popcorn and stay tuned. All right, if there's nothing else, I'm going to close this out then. We want to say another special thank you to our top sponsor, FPEA. We are still looking forward to bringing more on this list. I have barely had time to sleep, so much less process any of the other things, but we will get this updated. Thank you all so much for watching and being here and supporting us. And like I said, please absolutely share the stream. I do also put these up on Facebook afterwards. All of our social media handles on all platforms are FLHEF 1985. Thank you guys all for being with us today.
Thank you.